It has been a heavy week, friends. From national and local election cycles to the struggles that we continue to hold in our personal lives, there is fatigue and in some instances rage at the multi-layered tensions that we continue to hold individually and collectively as a body. And I've not been immune from it either. Pastors are human beings as well, with their own set of hopes and disillusionments alongside you. But this whole experience, even over these past few days in my reflections and in continuing to lean into my own questions about today's reality, it reminded me of a story that has been meaningful to my heart, and I hope it will be to yours as well. So there were two brothers living on adjoining farms, and they had for 40 years of their adulthood continued to work collaboratively and lovingly together to build this land into a beautiful resource of fruitfulness. And as it happens, and sometimes, as you know, it doesn't take much, they had their first big experience of conflict, their first big rift. And it began with a small misunderstanding that over weeks and then rolling into months blew up into this hostile silence following the exchange of bitter and spiteful words between the brothers. So one morning, for one of the brothers' houses, there was a knock on that older brother's door, and opening the door, the brother found a man that looked like a carpenter. He had a tool belt and some different things that he brought, eager to do some odd jobs around the farm, thinking that this place was ripe for a use of his own skills. And so after thinking for a quick moment, the older brother said, "Oh yeah, I have the perfect job for you." Pointing toward that meadow over to the right, he said, last week there was a meadow between our two farms until my brother decided to bulldoze a whole area through it that connected to the local river, and now there is a creek, a stream that runs right smack dab through the middle of our property. And so if he's going to do that, I want to do him one better. I want you to build an 8-foot fence between me and him so that between our lands we'll never have to see each other again. And so this carpenter said, "Okay, I think I understand what you're asking me to do. I think I understand the situation. Provide me the wood, provide me a few more nails and a post hole digger, and I'd be happy to do it for you." And so the older brother had errands to run, and so he went out, and over the whole day he was gone while the carpenter began to get started. And so all day he measured, he sawed, and he built what the older brother seemed to dream. And at just about sunset, the older brother, that farmer, came back, returned home to see the carpenter completing his task, and his jaw dropped, speechless. For the carpenter hadn't built a fence at all. It was a beautiful product that he gave the older brother, complete with handrails and everything, but he had created instead a bridge stretching from one side of the creek to the other. And it was, again, a fine piece of work, but imagine the older brother's surprise when he saw his younger brother standing right in the middle of the bridge waiting for him. And the younger brother, as the older brother started to walk toward the new gift that he had given their property, the younger brother said, "I can't believe you did this. After everything I said to you, this is so rich, and I'm so sorry. And I'm so grateful for you. Thank you." The two brothers embraced, and they, turning, saw the carpenter starting to walk away. And the older brother said, wait, you can do more. You can do all sorts of things around here. I may have other projects for you. And the carpenter said, man, I'd love to stay, but I really have more bridges to build elsewhere. It is a story, but it has been and continues to be a story proverbially for our lives. What does it take to build a bridge when we've come to the point where it seems like there is none? We begin here, inside of each of us. Each one of us carries the carpenter's tools on our person, whether we recognize it or not. We carry them with a heart that knows deep down that the way to wisdom, and the only way, is not skipping around life's conflict or life's complications or complexities, but only through it. Beyond every boundary that we as human beings continue to trudge in as a trench or to build up and make for ourselves, there's always something new to learn, to discover, and to explore. That way of wisdom, the abundant life that God dreams for us, is building and searching for these connections rather than building walls that keep us away from our mess. Over the past few weeks, we've been exploring these proverbs, these freeze-dry parables in some ways, where wisdom literature continues to speak into our everyday modern reality, with the underlying assumption that the wisdom we find in these words is the very kind of wisdom that we lack sometimes today. And we need now more than ever. The Hebrew Scriptures speak this to us. And today, at the end of our series, we are going to end at the beginning, at the prologue, the very first words that are the wisdom for Solomon and so many others that are in leadership in official ways, and those of us that are continuing to self-lead in our lives. This is the whole reason why the Proverbs were written, for these everyday struggles of life that we all face and we try so hard to reduce to a manageable size. Those black and white binaries that easily seem to organize our lives in categories and help us sleep at night. They don't have us requiring much energy or discernment or even sacrifice from us. These proverbs were meant to blow these binaries, these verses kind of phrases in our lives to bits and help us see and accept a more nuanced view of the world in which we live. So today we're going to look at one of the most common comparisons in the Proverbs text. It's throughout all of the chapters. You can see it laced within. And this is the comparison between the simple and the prudent. So this Hebrew word masal, it basically means a parable or proverb of comparison, placing one thing over and against another. And looking at this comparison, the first thing I thought when I was looking at the two words, when was the last time that I said the word prudent? Like looking at a situation and saying, I just don't think that would be very prudent. It's very kind of esoteric and highbrow when you hear it. Most of us don't use that kind of language anymore. But there are all sorts of different translations. Rob Bell uses and found a translation for prudence to be subtlety, the simple and the subtle, that might break it open for you as well. So the simple, by contrast, we often attribute to be a good thing with good positive value. Some of you might read Real Simple magazine or find yourselves decorating your homes in a very simple kind of modern decluttering kind of setup. But the simple that is mentioned in this wisdom literature inspired by God is not a positive value at all. These two things continue to peer together. If you look at verse 4 that Reverend Carol read for us, it says, "For giving prudence to those who are simple is wise." And so we find other ways that it is said, waywardness of the simple will kill the person, that they are fools, that their simplicity will ultimately destroy them. You see, going further into Proverbs, just looking at the way it's cast throughout the whole text, you have chapter 14, verses 15 and 18, first that say, "The simple believe anything, but the prudent give thought to their steps." In verse 18, "The simple inherit folly, but the prudent are crowned with knowledge." In chapter 22, verse 3, "The prudent see danger and take refuge in the Lord, but the simple keep going." We live in a culture that worships at the altar of the simple, Rob Bell says. You can see it all around. Simplicity in our modern day relationships and wherever you see human interaction happening looks something like this. If you can like it, Snapchat it, tweet it, hate it, attack it, grasp it, conquer it, mock it, demean it, demonize it, purchase it, post it, or assault it for your own gain in under 10 seconds, it's good news. If you're in a world that worships the altar of the simple and you move to prudence, it can often feel like inaction. It's kind of like the simple is characterized by this whole idea of don't just stand there, do something. Where by contrast, the prudent might be seen as don't just do something, stand there. The word petit or patha that says simple, it means seducible or foolish. The simple in this holy text are often distracted easily, that whole squirrel effect, going one way or another without much of a secure rudder to guide their way. The simple are people who don't reflect on situations in which they find themselves and often think without speaking. The simple inherit folly. They're handed a view of the world and often just take it without examination, without questioning, attaching themselves sometimes to those ideas and ways of being that serve their interest best. The simple love, yes or no questions. Don't we all sometimes? They love litmus tests, sound bites. They love us versus them language, or ascertaining whether you are this or that to put you in a neatly closed box. The simple are seduced by money and sex and power and easy answers. And you often find in these states of being, in people that we know and love or respect, a willful denial on what's actually present before them, a refusal to acknowledge the ambiguous nature of life because of what it requires of us all to relinquish sometimes. We all know these people in our lives. Some days, you and I have been these people. But the prudent in Hebrew communicates subtlety and nuance. It's translated, give subtlety to the naive. The prudent are often those that understand that there is complexity to life and that it must be listened to, revered, and respected. In the realm of judgment, they understand that there is often, if not always, more going on underneath the surface. The prudent, the subtle, see things from a higher altitude oftentimes, and from a place of willful humility, believing and holding the possibility that they may not have all of the answers, that they might even be wrong, and that stance in itself is a place of countercultural strength. The prudent or the subtle keep listening for the way of God that will show up in the world. They believe that it is already here. Where polarization and pulling apart of us versus them is good news to some, it is not gladsome good news to the prudent. They believe or find out even by accident that the revelation of God, being able to see God, the sacred in all things, is in the created world itself. Although we may distinguish between the sacred and the secular, the prudent often don't see the world in those us versus them terms, in science versus faith, or in reason versus religion. All of the realms are together, integrated in one place, and we have to figure out how to navigate it with intense and passionate curiosity. The prudent know that life is not static, but constantly evolving, and that we, as creating beings in this life, are also constantly evolving too, never staying in the same place, and often, if not always, never arriving at pinnacle knowledge. We never really master life as living in a way and place of subtlety. There is that childlike faith and obedience to the prudent, with a spirit that reminds me of the words of the poet T.S. Eliot from the Four Quartets in Little Gidding. Hear these words: "What we call the beginning is often the end. And to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is really where we start from. We shall not cease from exploration. And the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and to know the place for the first time." In Proverbs, Lady Wisdom calls and says to those who are simple, those who have no sense, "Come in. Be welcome and eat and drink." She's preparing a feast for everyone. And what you and I need is wisdom. And there is plenty to go around. Because even though it might be told to you that there is not enough, we do not live in a universe of lack. So I know you join me today in grieving for the place in which we stand, all of the possibility and opportunity, and certainly all of the broken places that we can see in this moment. But the health of our nation, the health of our communities, the health of our families is related directly to the health of every human heart, starting with yours and with my own. So where are you today? Do you find yourself living from a posture of prudence and subtlety, or being simple? Wisdom insists that you come. Wisdom insists that you invite others alongside you that will help you see clearly as to where you stand today. Sometimes leaving the simple ways are indeed painful. Sometimes you have to have a funeral for your own life, Rob Bell says, or for perspectives or relationships that you have to let go of, those comfort blankets that have kept you and held you back from a new life adventure. There is grief in all of it. But remember today that you are not alone, friends, that we all have the toolbox. So build the bridge for wisdom, Lady Wisdom. She is always on your side. In the name of God, who was and is to come. Amen.